A very good evening. So, in today's lecture, we are going to study about movements in biomechanics. So, the learning outcomes will be that the participants will be familiar with the sagittal plane movements. Number 2, you will be familiar with the frontal plane movements. And number 3, you will be familiar with the transverse plane movements. And you will be able to relate these movements with anatomical reference planes. So, now, why are you studying these movements? What is the use? It is very useful and it is extremely compulsory, you can say essential, to know these terminologies, these planes and these movements, because whenever you do any biomechanical analysis on any athlete, these terminologies are used very frequently. This is the language of biomechanics, so you should know the language to express yourself in the biomechanics. So this is the language. And yesterday in the chapter 2 we have learned about the planes. Now we'll be dealing with the movements. Each of these planes have specific movements, and I'll discuss all of them one by one with examples so that you can clearly know what are these movements, and you should be able to identify that, right? Now, starting with the first one, sagittal plane movements. What are sagittal plane movements? First of all, remember sagittal plane. What is that? Sagittal plane is the plane which will cut your body into two parts, left and the right. Okay, I think you got it now. So the movements in these planes are usually forward and backward movements. Either you do forward movement or you do backward movement, and these movements are always parallel to the sagittal plane. So when I show the figure, you will be very clear. And the main names which fall in this plane are flexion, extension, hyperextension, dorsiflexion, and the plantar flexion. The last two are related with your foot, and other three are related to different parts of the body. So I'll let you know how. So let's proceed to the next slide. Now in this slide I will discuss flexion, extension and hyperextension. And one thing I will let you know right now here. Now this flexion, extension and hyperextension are defined in two ways. Always remember this. These two ways are providing us two definitions. The first way is to define these with respect to anatomical position, which we have learned yesterday. What is that? When you are standing with your palms facing forward. So this is the anatomical position. Okay. So whenever you are doing some analysis or you are studying some movement, you ask athlete to stand in that position. This is the standard reference position to study these movements. Okay, so keep in mind. Now in this slide we are in reference to anatomical position, means the body at starting position is standing in the anatomical position, palms facing forward. Okay, so what is flexion? Flexion includes anteriorly directed sagittal plane rotations. Anteriorly directed. Anterior means forward facing, right? Sagittal plane rotations. The rotations are the movements which are parallel to the sagittal plane. And the organs which are involved are head, trunk, upper arm, forearm, hand, hip. All of these organs are applied, and when they move forward anteriorly parallel to the sagittal plane, the movement is known as flexion. Just concentrate on this figure. Okay, so in this figure, earlier he was in the anatomical position, then he moved his arm right upward like this, forward. This is anterior position. He is moving his arm towards anterior side, and this rectangle is your sagittal plane. Okay, this whole rectangle, think like that so that you can understand. Now this arm, sorry for this, I don't have any pen tab so that it couldn't be very accurate, so please just concentrate on this rectangle. So this is the sagittal plane, and this arm is moving in parallel to this, and it is moving forward. Now it is going away from the anatomical position, so that means this is flexion. So in the flexion, when you are talking with respect to anatomical position, the movement always take the organ away from that anatomical position. So arm is going away. Number 1. So 2 points you should remember. Keep in mind that first point is the movement is parallel to the sagittal plane, right? And it is moving forward. Anterior movement is there of this arm, right? Number 3, that it is going away from the anatomical position. This is flexion. So this one is your flexion. So I tried to write with mouse. Okay, F. The second one is your extension. So extension is just opposite, going back to anatomical position. Now he was here, and this one he got his arm back, though he's not in the net. He's not keeping the figure is like that. It should be palm should face forward. Okay, so anyways, the coming back to the anatomical position is your extension. Extension is defined as the movement that returns the body segment to anatomical position from a position of flexion. So this was flexed position, now is coming back to the anatomical. And what is hyperextension? When the rotation beyond anatomical position, when he moves his arm beyond this. So this one, third one is your hyperextension. Okay, this one is flexion, going away, coming back to the anatomical position is your extension, and going beyond that is your hyperextension. And this is happening parallel to the sagittal plane at the shoulder joint. So this is flexion, extension and hyperextension with respect to anatomical position. I hope it is clear. Now in this slide I am going to tell you the second definition with respect to joint angle. So this is the second definition of flexion extension. So what is flexion with respect to joint angle? Bending movement in which the relative angle of the joint between the two adjacent segments decrease. So decrease is the key word. So whenever joint angle decreases, flexion is happening. Similarly, what is extension is the opposite. Straightening movement in which the joint angle of the joint between the two adjacent segments increases. So this is the key difference. So in this, flexion is defined on the basis of joint angle. When joint angle decreases, that means flexion is happening, and when joint angle increases, that means extension is happening. The figure will make it very clear. Now this is hand, it is undergoing flexion and extension. So what is flexion? So from this resting position, when you move your hand, you bend your hand basically like this. Okay, see that this angle is decreasing. So this is the joint, so this angle is decreasing. So what is happening? Flexion. And on the other hand, when you are again going back from this position, when you increase your angle to again straight position like this from up to here, so you are increasing the angle, so that means it is extension. Now if you go beyond this, so what is that? Like if I extend the angle up to this point, that means that is your hyperextension. Okay, so I think it is very clear with respect to joint. Another example, this is also applicable at your elbow joint. Here you can see. Now when you do a bicep curl, you are doing flexion, you are doing flexion basically. So this angle is going to decrease, right? And whenever you are extending, it is going to increase. So this is flexion extension. Okay, and it is similar, that is the same thing which I am told you earlier. So I hope it is very clear from this slide. Flexion, extension and hyperextension. Now again we are in the same plane. Now we are coming to the foot at the ankle joint. So on ankle joint we have two movements, dorsiflexion and the plantar flexion. So just concentrate on the figure first, you will understand more clear way. So whenever you flex your foot towards the plane, this is the way you can remember it. Plantar, just I am telling you the way to grasp it. So plantar flexion, plantar, from plantar you derive plane. So plane is your floor. Whenever you put your foot towards the floor, that means you are bending your foot towards the floor, so that means that is plantar flexion. Okay, and opposite of this, when you are getting your foot away from the floor, that is your dorsiflexion. So now coming to the definitions. Dorsiflexion is the upward movement of the foot, so that foot is closer to the tibial bone or it is away from the floor. Motion bringing the top of the foot towards the lower leg is known as dorsiflexion. So in the dorsiflexion, your foot is going away from the floor and it is going towards the tibia bone. So that is the point. So this is your dorsiflexion. Now plantar flexion, it is opposite. That I told you that plantar means plane. Just drive it like that. Plane means your floor. When you are putting your foot towards the floor, that means plantar flexion is happening. So these are the two movements. Again, these movements of foot are parallel to this rectangle, and this parallel rectangle is your sagittal plane. So every movement will be forward, backward, and parallel to the sagittal plane. So these are all about your movements in the sagittal plane. Now I am coming to the frontal plane movements. So frontal plane, again I'll make you revise. So frontal plane is the plane which will divide your body into two parts, and these two parts are front and back. Remember? Okay. So the movements here are usually sideways movements. Sideways. Now this is, just concentrate on this figure. So this is the plane, this is your frontal plane, and we have inserted like this from top and cut the body into halves. The front one is your anterior portion and backward, okay, the two parts. Now this is the plane, frontal plane, and the movements will happen sideways because only then it will be parallel to this, okay. And the two major movements terminologies here are adduction and abduction, okay, and these are defined with respect to your midline. What is midline? Right central line passing through the body. This is your midline. So whenever you are taking your organ, in this case we are talking about this leg, when it is going away from the midline, so that means it is going adducted, take away. See, so that means abduction is happening. Whenever your movement is away from the midline, that means you are doing abduction, and the movement is parallel to the frontal plane, so it is known as frontal plane movements, and it is a sideways movement, right? And the adduction is opposite, bringing back towards the midline. So here is the midline, and this leg is again going towards the midline like this. So when you are going towards the midline, that means adduction is happening. So these are the two main movements which are happening in the frontal plane. Now frontal plane movements in case of spine, again sideways, either this way or this way, and think of this slide as a frontal plane. Now this movement is happening in parallel, either this side or on the right side, and you are moving your spine. So when you move towards the left, it is known as lateral, towards the right, then it is known as lateral flexion right. And when you are moving your spine towards the left side, it is known as lateral flexion left, and it is again happening in the frontal plane. So this is the second group of the movement. Now coming to the hands. Now this is, the names are different, the things happening is same again in the frontal. Think of this whole portion as your frontal plane, and again we are doing this movement like here or this way, parallel to this plane. So it is sideway movements again. Now what we call them as radial deviation and ulnar deviation. So the rotation of the hand of the wrist in the frontal plane towards the radius or the thumb side is referred to as radial deviation. So which is towards the thumb, here is the thumb, and this is the radial deviation, right? So when you move like this, your hand, so like Tata, when you do the Tata bye bye, it's like that. So when it is going towards your thumb, so that means it is going towards your radius bone, so that is radial deviation. And the opposite is when it is going towards the little finger side towards the ulna, that is ulnar deviation, and this is your ulnar deviation. Again, the movement is sideways and parallel to the frontal plane, hence it is in this group. Okay. Now, frontal movements of foot. Similar thing. Again, think of this as a frontal plane, and now the foot will move either this way or this way. So outward rotation of sole of the foot is termed as eversion. When it is outward, this is aversion, away from the midline. So here will be the midline, suppose. So this is aversion. And when it is towards the midline, inward rotation, then it is inversion. So these are the two movements, sideway movements, parallel to the frontal plane, happening at the foot. Okay. Now coming to the third plane, last plane, that is your transverse plane movements. Transverse plane, you all know, that will cut the body into top and the bottom, right? So we'll slice the body like this from here. We'll slice it top, bottom. Now think of this plane like it is coming out of your computer screens. I am trying to draw, just please bear with me because I don't have any pen drive with me, so that just I am trying. So this is the plane, so I am just shading it so that you can understand. So this plane is your transverse or horizontal plane, and this plane has cut the body into upper part and the lower part. Now the movements which are happening parallel to this will be rotations. Okay, so see the arrows like this, rotation. So rotation movements happen in this plane. Okay, so the left rotation and right rotation are the most common, and these are used to describe when you move your head left and right. So that is your rotation movements happening in the transverse plane. Moving your neck, moving your trunk when you are doing twist dance, you do, right? You do twisting in the dance, left right, you are moving your trunk left towards left or right, you are rotating it. So that all rotations are transverse plane movements. Left rotation, either you do left clockwise or anti-clockwise, right? Left rotation, right rotation. So this one is the left towards. Again, rotation of an arm or leg as a unit in the transverse plane is called mid rotation or internal rotation. When rotation is towards the midline, again they are taking reference of midline. So when you are rotating towards the midline, so that means you are doing mid rotation. And on the other hand, when you are going away from the midline like this, so that means you are doing lateral rotation. So these are the two rotations, medial and lateral, with respect to leg. And with respect to head, neck and trunk, we have left rotation and right rotation. So head, neck, trunk are very simple, left, right. And when you are talking with respect to leg or arm, then it will be medial rotation or lateral rotation. I hope it is clear. Now talking of forearm, this is also very important, supination and pronation. So basically outward and inward rotation of the forearm with respect are respectively known as supination and pronation. So when you rotate your hand like this is your pronation, and when you supinate, just you remember like that, supination means super means you are making your hand forward, forward facing. So you will rotate like your hand like this will be on the upper sides, right? And when you are keeping it behind like this one, that is pronation. So this is your supination, this is your pronation. Same thing is happening in the foot also, and that is very important with regard to running biomechanics. Pronation, some people over pronate, some people pronate less. So the pronation part should be very ideal for the biomechanical correct running. And by birth or some bad habit, if you have some problem, you over pronate or something like that, so that should be corrected. So this is one of the very important application. So I'll discuss this part later on when we'll talk about analysis and all that. So pronation and supination are very important. Some similarly in the foot, some supinate more. So both of these should be very ideal for the perfectly effective biomechanical running. Okay, and there are many things like footwear is being designed. There are specialized footwear if problem doesn't go, so we can have that. So I'll discuss in the later. Okay. And another movement, this one is a bit confusing, but don't confuse it. So what is happening? This is happening in the transverse plane, but this movement is of shoulder. Now sometimes you have seen the umpire when 4 in the cricket, when he gives the sign of 4 like that. So when you rotate your arm like this, what you are doing basically, you are basically rotating it, right? But you are also performing some adduction and abduction. So abduction is going away like this, away from the midline, and adduction is towards the midline. So as it is happening with rotation in the transverse plane, we call it as horizontal adduction and horizontal abduction. So don't confuse it. Always keep in mind, now two things is happening. So that's why, because in the transverse plane, this is your transverse plane. Just think like that. I am making again a rectangle so that you can understand. So this, just think you are watching it from the aerial view you are taking, like drone shots. Like when you are watching from the above, you can see the head here and like this, right? Okay. So in this way you can see this plane. So this plane has cut the body into upper and lower part. It is passing through his their trunk. Okay. Now you can understand very easily. So now this movement is happening in parallel to this plane, transverse plane. So that's why it is transverse plane movement. However, if we think of midline will pass, start from here and go deep till foot. So think of it like that. It is going down towards foot. Now this arm is going away and going towards the midline. So that's why that abduction is happening. So this is known as your horizontal adduction and horizontal abduction. I hope it is very clear. You watch it 2 or 3 times, you will understand. Okay. And this is the last slide. Again, I am reminding you so that you can understand. So this is the anatomical position I was talking about, and the beauty of this position is this, because it is very standard position in anatomy. Also in the anatomy classes, doctors also follow these procedures to understand the terminologies, and it is applicable because it is most widely used and accurate for all aspects of the body. So in this we can study flexion, extension, hyperextension. The movements, most of the movements which I have told you today are all start from anatomical position. So how it is done, you already know. You are standing straight, the main key is like your palm should face forward. Okay. And another position is your standard position, like you are standing attention, this arm is rotated parallel. Okay. So this is your fundamental position, essentially same as an anatomical position, except arms are at the sides and palms are facing the body. So this one is utilized most of the times for biomechanical these movements. Okay. I hope it is very clear. So thank you very much.